All right, here we go. Mics are hot. Ready, camera one. Take one. We are rolling. Ready in 3, 2.
This Soonerscoop.com video is streaming in crystal clear 4K resolution on YouTube thanks to Enjoy Vision in Oklahoma City. If you're ready to see the rest of the world just as clearly, get your fresh perspective at Enjoy Vision. Enjoy Vision. This is where Sooner Scoop LASIX. Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosovich, George Stoya here from the Soonerscoop.com studios. Josh McCuistion back in Houston HQ. Debut of the 2026 Sooner State rankings. We'll get into kind of the top 5 and then everybody else in the rankings that Josh put out on Monday. You can see the entire list on Soonerscoop.com. It's a really good class in 2026. Plenty of guys, and especially in that top 5 that I'm excited to talk about. The Philadelphia Eagles, the Birds, are the Super Bowl champions. Congratulations to Jalen Hurts, Super Bowl MVP, as well as Lane Johnson, Grant Calcaterra as well. Good for those guys. Did you guys enjoy the Super Bowl? Good morning, good afternoon. How are we?
Yeah, it was a blowout.
It was a blowout.
So
it
that
sucked.
wasn't fun.
The game sucked.
Yeah, the game sucked, but it was awesome to see Jalen. He was
crazy.
I mean, he played
Super Bowl MVP.
great. Grant Calcaterra had his moment of fame with the onside kick recovery late in the game, and obviously Lane Johnson just continues to put together a resume that's good enough to get him into the Hall of Fame.
Unbelievable performance for the offensive line for the Eagles. I think that the one thing that really kind of bugged me last night as we were watching the fourth quarter unfold was, I think going in, everybody knew that the Philadelphia Eagles had a better offensive line. They had a way better defensive line. I just think that there was a lot in my brain, at least, that goes, yeah, but Mahomes is on the other side. Who knew that having a really good defensive line, Josh, getting pressure on quarterbacks. A lot of what we saw from Kansas City on Sunday night, I remember watching with Oklahoma this year, just in terms of when a quarterback catches the ball and the play's over in the first 3 seconds, it makes life extremely tough to move the football.
So what Eddie's telling you all is he's expecting Jackson Arnold to be Pat Mahomes like this year at Auburn. So that's what he's telling you all. No, guys, that's the deal. I mean, I don't care how good you are. I think we all agree Patrick Mahomes is probably going to end up as one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks to have ever played the game. And he wins last night, and I think it starts becoming really hard to not think of him as that guy, the number one. So it's really – that was wild. And, I mean, I knew I liked Philly's defensive line, but they were unbelievable last night. Guys, for one game – I'm trying to think of a Super Bowl winner of the last 4 or 5 years that I think would have stayed within 2 touchdowns of Philly last night. They were unbelievably good.
Incredible. It was an awesome performance. And I guess if you're an Eagles fan, you loved it. I think the rest of the country, though, was kind of hoping, like myself, I wish this was a game.
I still found it fascinating, though, just because it was just I didn't see it coming. Like the blowout and the pick 6 by DeJean, and then the interception right after that from Mahomes, 24-0. I was like, I can't
don't
believe
expect
this is
that
happening.
from Pat Mahomes. And even I guess this kind of represents how good the Chiefs have been. Even when it got to 24-0 at halftime, and there was a very, very, very
nothing. I was still maybe
small part of me that was okay, if you get a touchdown drive here and get a 2-point conversion, it would have been a lot more interesting. But congratulations to the Eagles, all the Eagles fans out there on YouTube. I'm sure you're handling yourself extremely well. I don't know. It is what it is. We now move into the spring, obviously. Oklahoma, spring bowl just kind of right around the corner. But first things first, let's get into a little bit of the Sooner State rankings, Josh. You made the debut, or you debuted the list for 2026. We'll just kind of highlight some of the guys that are in the rankings. Number 1, Mason James, the wide receiver out of Dorban North. Taja Overton checking in at number 2, the 6'3", 275-pound defensive tackle out of Owasso. Caden Jones, the running back out of Jinx. Obviously, Kewan Jones's kid. We've talked about him ad nauseum, and we'll continue to talk about him, as well as DJ Ackerson rounding out your top 5 for Putnam City. We talked about him here on the recruiting report here over about the last month since he picked up his Oklahoma offer. But those 5 guys, they kind of solidified themselves as top 5. Was it a tough decision in terms of putting these guys into a list?
It always is, because and it breaks down really into tiers. When I look at those top 3, the 3 that we've really talked about for a long time, Caden Jones, Taj Overton, and Mason James, I think those guys are just a little step ahead of everybody else. I think there's pretty clearly a tier there where those are the kind of no doubt elite national type recruits, and you look at their offer list, and there's a lot to back that up. And I like really over a few weeks as I really tried to kind of narrow this down. I moved those guys around several times. I think when it came down to it for me at this point, Mason James is the guy that I look at and say, I'm going to be real surprised if he's not a very good college football player. Like, I don't know if there's that superstar guy in this class. I don't know if there's that guy. Now, there could be. There's some guys I really like, and I think there's some real potential. And Mason James could be one of those guys. But he's one of those guys against elite competition. He shows up in a big way. And, Eddie, you saw that tremendous performance he had against Owasso this year. He is just so dynamic in space, and that was really one of the things that separated him a little bit for me.
And Josh, those three guys, if you could just where OU stands with all three, because it feels like all three of those, I would say Oklahoma feels pretty good about right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Mason James is a guy that really plays it close to the vest is not the right way to say it, but he's kind of tough to read, and he's very open to everybody and really plans to take visits. I just don't get any impression he's in a hurry. With Taj Overton, you see a guy that is he kind of says all the right things, like, I'm going to look at this, I'm going to do this. And then just about every time Oklahoma has the doors open, he's in Norman. So I think Oklahoma's in a really strong shape there. I think he loves Todd Bates. There's a really good relationship there. Taj is a guy who's not like the big social media, real active type of guy, but at the same time, he's super easy to talk to, kind of a fun-loving kid. And I think he and Bates just really, really connect. With Caden Jones, obviously, the connections there between DeMarco Murray, his father, Keewan, the university itself, and all the time Caden's grown up around Oklahoma. I think all three of these would be pretty surprising if they weren't part of Oklahoma's 2026 class. Now, obviously there's changes that we can't foresee, but as things currently stand, I really like where OU is. I would say if there's one that I think is probably the most open to the process, I would say it's probably Mason James.
In terms of guys, as we start working our way through the list here, Josh, there's a couple names that, I think are starting to come on, obviously coming off of a really good junior season. I go to number 6, Daniel McMorris, a guy that we've talked about out of Norman North High School. Who are some of the guys that maybe could work their way into, say, the top 5? Or if you want to expand it even further down, maybe work their way into the top 10 here over the course of, obviously the summer and moving into their senior season.
Yeah, and we're going to have some follow-up stories for those that kind of want to dive into these conversations where I'm going to look a little bit at, like what we're talking about here, where there's some risers, there's some guys who could fall, who are some guys that we just want to see more of. And I would say Daniel McMorris is really that last one. I want to see more of him because I know what I read, and it's like 6', 250 pounds. He's huge, he's long, and you have this impression when you hear about these guys, like, oh, he's kind of a power forward playing offensive tackle. But if you watch this guy on tape, he is killing people. Like, he plays with a nasty streak that I would not expect to see. I kind of figured, oh, he's a basketball transplant and he's not big enough to, be a real power forward, so they're going to put him on the football field. But he plays with some real edge. And again, he's a guy that I understand why schools have some trepidation, because he's not huge. He's not real heavy in the lower half. And there's this feeling of like, can we put the weight on him? Can he develop the way he needs to? I think that becomes even more interesting with, how you're watching schools work NIL. Like, does he sign with maybe a little smaller school, and then 2 years from now, he's the big thing in the transfer portal? Like, I could see that happening. So we'll have to see what kind of transpires. But what I want to see is, what does his weight look like in the spring? How much size does he put on? How much mass does he add? Because if he gets into that 270, 275 range and carries it well, then I think his recruiting could change pretty dynamically. And, he's, like I said, he's a guy that if I was going to look outside the top 5 and say, who's the guy that could end up number 1 in this class, it's Daniel McMorris. Like, I know people that maybe don't know him kind of think that's crazy. I just see a ton of potential, and he plays at such a premier and important position.
Josh, is there anybody on your list of 25 guys that you would say you maybe like more than others? Maybe you have them higher ranked. I know you mentioned McMorris, but any guys like that? Anybody that you think, has a big summer at camps or has a big senior year that could really make a big jump?
A guy that I'll highlight is, one of our buddy Sean Cooper, C4 guys, Kenny Golston from Valiant, and he's a guy I had a chance to see him work out last summer, down at C4 stuff, and I liked him. I knew I did. He's a big, burly guy, about 6'1", 205, 210, really well put together. And as a back, you're kind of like, okay, I like him. Like I kind of know what he's going to be. I know where he fits. Very much a downhill, one-cut type of guy. But then I watched some clips of him at linebacker, and I'm like, okay, that's a very different thing. And it's what we see a lot of times where he's a good athlete at running back. He's a possibly elite one at linebacker. And I've got him at number 20 right now in the state. And again, that's just more of he's kind of limited in the clips he has at linebacker. But I'm watching a guy closing in space. He plays physically. He's violent when he arrives. Like, there's a lot of stuff there that I'm like, okay, you can work with this. It's just a matter of I'd like to see him like in a camp setting. Like, how does he move? How does he work in coverage? Like, how does he do some of the little, not even technical things, because I don't expect him to be there right now. Just how natural does he look moving like a linebacker, to where right now I think he's just a really good athlete, kind of doing what he does. And if he can keep that up, then fine, great. But again, he's a guy, if you told me at the end of the year he's in the top 10, it wouldn't shock me, because I would guess that he went to some camps and really kind of shined.
Somebody that did debut in the top 10 at number 10, Landon Anderson. And when you look at the measurables, 6'5", 247 out of Edmond, Santa Fe, one of the better programs on the west side of the state. What can you tell us about him? A little bit of a relative unknown coming out of his junior season, but when you look at the measurables, I'm sure that attention is going to continue to progress here as we move into the beginning of spring ball.
Yeah, the Santa Fe staff, when I had put out a call for, hey, anybody I need to see, anything I need to watch, that's a staff I go way, way back with, and they had sent me some tape, and I watched it, and, like I said, I'll be honest, at my first glance, I was like, okay, big body, I kind of like what he does, and then I went back again and watched it as his notoriety started to pick up. Like, I want to own that. Like, I'm not going to say I was ahead of the chase on this, because I wasn't. With Anderson, though, the more you watch him, you're just like, okay, because he's 6'4", 255, 260. Like, he is that kind of prototype NFL defensive end, like where he's going to play at 275, 280, and he can hold up in the run. He's got some ability as a pass rusher. I can't lie, and you guys know me. I want to spin everybody in to a smaller position or to a bigger position and let them be a better athlete. And to me, I watch him and I'm like, what would he be like as a 3 technique? Like, what could he be at 295, being aggressive and being athletic? And I think he'd hold up, because, like I said, kind of differently than what we were talking about with Daniel McMorris, he does have a great base already. He's very thick in the lower body, and you see a guy that can stack up and play some run on the interior. So I think he's really interesting. Oklahoma's had some contact there. He's already committed to Kansas. So we'll kind of see what transpires. But I know Oklahoma's had some preliminary, interest in him over the last couple of months. I'm not saying anything's like imminent there. But when you have a guy like that with that type of body in your state, you got to take a look, because they're just not going to have a lot of guys like that in the state of Oklahoma.
That was going to be my next question, just in terms of when you look at the guys, and obviously Oklahoma's been active with all the guys that are in the top 5, right? Is there anybody that Oklahoma, as they move into their, I guess, going into their senior season, starting their spring, is there anybody on the list that, or maybe even not on the list, that you want to see more of, that maybe Oklahoma starts getting involved in by the time that we get into end of November, into December, into the playoffs and all that kind of stuff before early signing day here at the end of this year?
Well, and I've already highlighted McMorris,
sure,
so I won't say him, and he was at Oklahoma's initial junior day a couple of weeks ago. But a couple of guys I do want to highlight are at 7, and I'm gonna butcher this name, but Xavier,
you go for it, because God knows that I won't be able to.
Yeah, at Rejoice Christian out of Tulsa. And this is a guy that's, he's picked up an Oklahoma State offer. He's gotten some attention here lately, and Ben Arbuckle actually was by to see him, I think, like the second week in January. So, like, they were interested. They wanted to go by and see this guy, but he's listed at like 6'4", 180, and you watch him on tape and he moves around really fluidly, apparently a very good basketball player. There's a lot of stuff there. Now, this is we talk about some of the private schools, Eddie, that we're accustomed to talking about, the Heritage Halls, the Caches, Holland Hall, some of these programs that have seen a lot of, what's that?
Lincoln Christian.
Yes, of course, Lincoln. That would be a terrible one to miss.
Bishop Kelly.
No.
Not so much.
But no, with this is Class A. These guys are playing, so you have to really take that into account when you watch it. But at the same time, like I'm watching him run away from guys, and with his big frame and the way he moves his feet, there's some, like a thicker Jeff Mead kind of comparison there that I could see. And I know that's not like that blows everybody's hair back, but there's a little more frame to him. He's not quite as big and tall as Jeff was, but a little thicker, a little bigger type of player. The other guy I would say, kind of sticking in the Tulsa area, and I should say this is a Tulsa-dominant class. There's a lot of really good talent in the Tulsa area, and this is from a school that, again, very familiar with, Bixby, and that's Trey McLaughlin, the linebacker there. I like him a lot, and he's really very much kind of a new age linebacker. You watch his first 5 clips, it's not him coming up and stuff and run. He's getting in passing lanes and breaking up throws and that kind of stuff. And it, listed at 6'3", 200 pounds, you're like, okay. There's a lot there that I think could suit Oklahoma. And, you look at his fellow linebacker, and that's Cord Nolan, who plays like a Brent Venables linebacker all day, every day. So Oklahoma's, with those two, Braden Presley at number 4 in the state, Oklahoma's going to be around Bixby this year. And who knows? There might be a game where McLaughlin or Nolan just has a huge performance and Oklahoma decides to pull the trigger. So, there's a lot of possibility at Bixby with, a guy like Braden Presley. Caden Penny in the 2027 class already having offers. Oklahoma's going to be around, so guys like I said, guys like Nolan, Nolan, McLaughlin, those guys are going to have a chance to make an impression and kind of get extra eyeballs from the Oklahoma staff.
Josh, just one quick one for me. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Last year, OU had 6 in-state guys, I believe, in the 2025 class. How many this year do you think Oklahoma has? Over or under 5.5 from this class? In-state kids.
I would probably take the over, and I think that may be because there's maybe a couple of later ads, kind of like I'm talking about, where, one of the things that to me makes Daniel McMorris interesting, when OU lands Michael Fasusi and Ryan Foje last year, not only is it hard to keep kind of pumping out that kind of NIL for that position, at the same time, it's going to scare some guys off. They're going to say, we're not going to be able to walk in and start over Michael Fasusi. But when you get a guy like McMorris, who you can go in and say, hey, Daniel, you're 260 pounds. You're going to need a little time to develop. You can redshirt. You can take your time. And in 2 years from now, when maybe those guys are getting ready to head off to the NFL, you're going to be 310 pounds and you're ready to roll. And so you can kind of have that conversation. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's 6 or 7. I like this class. I think, I was talking to somebody about this earlier. I think from, 1 to 7, 8, it's pretty strong. And then I think it's a little soft kind of through the 10 to 20 range. And then from 20 to 35, you see some real depth. So there are some guys that I still think are going to emerge. Like, guys, Colton Yarborough, I think I've got him 17 in the state. Kid's committed to Arkansas. He's going to the SEC. So, there are a lot of good players kind of top to bottom in this class that either are highly productive players or have traits that you're like, well, okay, if they ever put all that together, they're really going to be somebody.
Josh, I want to ask you about another guy that is currently committed to Arkansas. But first, let us tell you about William and Lauren. We've been telling you about them all season long. As the official custom clothier of OU football, William and Lauren outfits your favorite OU players in custom suits that boost their confidence off the field to match their confidence on the field. Their perfectly tailored clothing ensures every Sooner stands out in comfort and style at prices that make luxury accessible. Visit William and Lauren in Oklahoma City or online at williamandlauren.com. That is williamandlauren.com. Dress like a champion and make your style as legendary as Oklahoma football at William and Lauren. I know that you have set up a date to
Yep.
get a suit with William and Lauren, get suited up for the big wedding extravaganza coming up in the summer.
Yeah, going in March with my fiance. We're gonna
Very
get fitted up and everything. My groomsmen as well. So looking forward to that. Getting a nice custom suit. Can't beat that. So
Absolutely.
It's gonna be awesome.
Very good. Thank you to William and Lauren. They've been with us. And make sure if you're up in the Tulsa area, in the 918, I believe they have a brick and mortar that is going to be opening up there for the friends up in Tulsa. So thank you to William and Lauren. They've been with us here all season long. And we'll continue on with a little bit of the conversation that we were having with the Sooner State rankings. You can check those out on Soonerscoop.com. Josh debuted him. A guy that I saw all the way back in August, I think, at the Carl Albert scrimmage, that I walked away really impressed with. Adam Austin, currently committed to Arkansas. He's number 14 in your rankings, Josh. He seems like one of those guys that maybe you keep an eye on and maybe something develops. Who's to say what happens in Fayetteville, obviously? He just kind of seems like one of those guys that Brent Venables would love.
Absolutely. And he's a guy, honestly, Eddie, before the emergence of DJ Ackerson, he was one of those guys where I was like, okay, this guy could be the cheetah in this class because, Adam's a guy that's played a lot of safety for Lawton Mack, and I don't dislike him back there. But, Eddie, you saw him.
Yeah,
I mean, he's 6'2", 205. He's a big guy. And it's just kind of a deal where I think he's going to get to college and he'll be 225 before he knows what happened. And so it's kind of like, well, okay, Kip Lewis is a great athlete, but asking him to play safety in the SEC, that's a tough sell. But, again, if things change, if Adam Austin has a great senior year, I think he's absolutely could be in play for Oklahoma. He is a very good player. And the thing, you look at it, and I'm not saying coaches place a lot of value in this stuff, but you look at the successes Oklahoma's had in Lawton, they've had some pretty nice wins there. You look at Javon Harris, a multi-year starter under Brent Venables, way back in the day. Jamal Brown, obviously being a Lawton Mac guy. So they've done some things, and that's a program that I think Oklahoma understands. Brett Manning's been there forever. Before that, his father. So, there's just a lot of easy connection that I think Oklahoma can draw from. And again, you mentioned him, Joshua Rushing. They've got some young talent they're pretty excited about. So, kind of another one of those deals where Oklahoma could have plenty of reasons to go see Lawton Mack, and if they catch Adam Austin on the right night, it wouldn't shock me at all if they were impressed enough to offer him.
Loosely, is there a little bit of Dom Alexander there with Adam Austin? It kind of reminded me. I thought about that when I saw him play back in August. Now, it's been a while since we saw Dom Alexander, obviously, but I remember watching him kind of loosely do the same type stuff. I think it was up in Ponca City when I went and saw him play in a playoff game way back when.
That's a pretty good comp. Now, I will say kind of different. Adams, I would say a more physical player than Dom was, but probably not quite the level of athlete that Dominique, so there's a little bit of, a changeover there, but I absolutely see what you're saying where you're kind of like, okay, this guy is going to play in college at 230. He's a good athlete. He comes from a good program. We can find a way to get this guy on the field, and I think that's what Oklahoma came down to. And to further your comparison, Eddie was committed to Arkansas at the time. So
there you go.
There's a lot of tie that binds those two guys that I had not thought of before you brought it up.
Dom Alexander now on Tulsa staff.
Yeah, that was really cool. I think on the strength staff, right?
Yeah,
that's cool. One of the good dudes, Dom Alexander, and probably a better linebacker than people around here want to.
He was good.
Either give him credit for or just outright remember.
Yeah,
I thought he was fantastic.
Played in the NFL for a few years too.
Absolutely. As far as anybody on the list that maybe Oklahoma's not going to get involved with, but you just go, I freaking like this guy. He's a football player. Who would maybe fit that bill? And I know that there's probably a number of guys that you could choose from.
I would say the guy that, I knew the name, but I hadn't watched him real closely. Keenan Farley at Booker T. That's a guy. And again, you talk he's listed at 6'1", 180. Even if he's, if it's the old rule of 10 inches or 2 inches and 10 pounds, okay, he's 5'11", 170. I don't care. When I watch that dude play, Eddie, you've been to enough camps with me. One of my pet peeves when a guy goes up to play press and then just gives a guy a free release, That does not exist with Keenan Farley. If he is in your face, he is going to jab you with the hand and try to reroute you as quickly as he can. And I love that. Like, he sets a tone from the minute the route starts that he is going to bother you and do everything he can to just be an absolute pest. And he's big enough and athletic enough to back it up. So, he's a guy, I think he's got one offer right now. I think it's Tulsa. Dom Franks actually offered him, speaking of OU guys at TU. And I'm frankly shocked he doesn't have some more. So I don't know if there's a hang-up that I just don't know about. Like maybe he ran 100 and it wasn't a great time. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. But it feels like he should have more attention. I wonder if as schools get around and see the spring practices and some of that stuff in late May, if maybe those doors start opening up for him a little bit.
Last but not least, I believe he is numero 15. Evanson Malaska has an Oklahoma offer, the younger brother of Jocelyn Malaska. When you went back and looked at the tape, Bethany made a really good run through the playoffs this past season. Anything surprise you? Did it match up with what you had heard? What were your thoughts on Evanson Malaska and ranking him at number 15?
Yeah, and I had a chance to see him this season, and I really liked what I saw. I mean, this is an explosive athlete, great feet. I mean, Eddie, when we were at camp a few years ago, when he got the offer, it was like his feet are amazing. Like that was all that I heard people talking about. And you see that. It shows up. Like whether he's playing running back and Bethany's just kind of getting the ball to him in space and saying, hey, man, go make a play, or whether it's him clumbing down and, making plays. Guys, he had some coverage stuff against C.J. Nixon on his tape. Bethany played them, I believe, in the second round of the playoffs this year out in Weatherford, and he broke up a pass that was thrown out to Nixon. So he's a guy that's not afraid to mix it up. He's going to get out there and make some plays. He's undersized. Like, he's not the biggest guy. We kind of wondered at the time they offered him, would he grow a little bit more? And, his older brother Jocelyn's a little bit bigger, kind of a, 6 foot long athletic guy. Evanson's, I think, is a more fluid athlete. In fact, I know he is. Like, he's clearly better with his change of direction. He's a little more fluid in his hips, a little oily. But at the same time, he just doesn't have the same size. So that kind of, it works out as a knock. But he's kind of like what I was saying with Keenan Farley. I don't understand how he doesn't have 15, 20 offers. Like, TU should be all over that kid. There's a number of schools that should be very hard after him, and I don't know if it's because he got offered by Oklahoma early, his brother's there, he's from Oklahoma, or, he lives in Oklahoma. I wonder if schools are just like, he's going to go to OU, right? So I think he's kind of been hurt by that a little bit, but I think he's a really good player that should have a lot more attention than he gets.
By the way, Jocelyn Malaska, just early rumblings out of winter is that he's having a pretty good offseason.
Interesting.
So we'll see if he can work his way into having some sort of role.
That's interesting. I mean, I think that some of that stuff is starting to leak out just in terms of winter workouts and all that.
I mean, we all knew he was, at
a position that, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this as we get into the spring, but it's a position that they need to build a little bit more depth, and especially with, Gentry Williams coming back, and you just don't really ever know what you're going to get from him from a health standpoint. That would be a kind of a bonus, a positive.
Well, and he was a good get in the portal last year. I think was it the spring portal a year ago that he came, or was it?
Yeah, he was here for the spring. Yes,
I think it was the winter.
Was it the winter? Yeah.
But I think he came as a PWO. So you get a guy like that, and look, I'm not saying he's going to go start for Oklahoma at corner next year, but if he's in the rotation or helping out with special teams, that'd be a good get. So
putting you on the spot real quick, you brought up winter workouts. Let's go with it for a second. Biggest rumor that you've heard, not rumor, but necessarily biggest surprising thing you've heard from winter workouts so far?
I don't know if it's surprising, but the thing that constantly comes up is Elijah Thomas.
Okay.
I mean, that's the name that I think Josh has probably heard the same, is that he is just crushing it. And I think we all thought that he could be somebody that could help Oklahoma next season, but it's trending towards he could be like a serious playmaker for OU as a true freshman.
I like that. I like that. And somebody very familiar to the Sooner State rankings. I think Elijah Thomas certainly had his time atop the spot, or in the top spot with the rankings. We move into a little bit of it. George and I were kind of joking about this earlier, but February, there's just not a whole lot out there just in terms of actual on-field stuff. Obviously, everybody's kind of ramping up for the start of spring ball, but there are visits that are going to start amassing for Oklahoma here. And you look at the month of June, specifically during the summer when they're going to bring a lot of guys in. Champ U Barbecue, obviously. June 6th, June 20th seems to be the big weekends for Oklahoma in terms of visits. As we start outlining things here over the next couple months, Josh, anything sticking out to you for the month of June?
Well, I think it's clear that Oklahoma is starting to, after all these trips, after all these visits that we've talked about where Brent Venables and everybody are out on the road for the last, month, frankly, now that we've hit this dead period, they can kind of take stock and say, not just, who do we like, but, who should we be bringing in? Who are the guys that fit us, culturally? Who are the guys that are not going to be a wasted visit? Because there's some guys that I'm sure OU loves, but they can take realistic stock and say, we're probably not getting that guy. He's headed to Alabama, or he's headed to Georgia, or whoever it may be. They're just not going to be that serious of contender. So I think you're starting to see a blend of who OU wants and who OU really has a realistic chance with. And you're starting to see a lot of those names starting to set up their official visits. We can certainly go into that. But what I've noticed so far, and I guess it kind of fits what we have, we talked about, I think, last week, where it feels like the offensive guys, we got a pretty good handle on that. Like, we kind of know who that's going to be, and I've got a list of guys that I just need to confirm with them on some of these official visit dates. But, like a lot of names, like the Noah Best, the Toa Katoas, a lot of the familiar names that we've talked about for months and months now are starting to set up their official visits, and not surprisingly, they're coming in on some of OU's big weekends.
Very good.
I had a question, and this may not be, I guess it's on topic, Josh, but I was just thinking about this the other day, and the spring game and all the stuff that we talked about on the pod about, maybe they get rid of the spring game. The spring game used to be a huge visit weekend for Oklahoma. Under Lincoln Riley especially, it felt like that was the weekend, that and Champ U barbecue. Is that still the case, Josh? Like, is OU looking to bring guys in for the spring game? Has that kind of gone away? Do other schools still use the spring game as a big visit weekend?
Well, what's so crazy is that, at the time Brent was at Clemson, they were almost morally opposed to the summer official visits. They wanted to wait until the fall. They wanted to bring guys in then. That was kind of the way they saw it. But since Brent's arrived, they've almost completely gone with all official visits are in the summer. Now, there's a few like, oh, okay, we got a late addition here, or a guy that they know is not going to make his decision until the fall. Okay, we'll let him wait a little while because we want to have our official as close to his decision date as it can be. So I think you're seeing some of those things kind of go on, but there's no question. I don't think if there's more than like 1-2 official visits for the spring game, I'd be pretty surprised. And I think those would be, a guy's going to decide before June, or there's some sort of special circumstance, whatever it may be. But I think what they want that to be is a huge unofficial visit weekend, guys to come in. And I think, George, it's a good question because I think it kind of leads to these guys came in. We invited all the guys we're interested in, but these guys came in. They showed how interested they are to us. We're going to really push for them heading into June. And sometimes you see like a change of, oh, this guy was coming in June for an official, but now it seems like OU's cooled on that guy a little bit. And I'd need to really look at it to know the direct correlation, but I can tell you, there have been times when there is some connection between did you make it in April for the spring game and, kind of where you are in the hierarchy of things come June.
And I know, last year they used the spring game as a visit weekend for some portal guys. Branson Hickman came in for the game. Dominic Williams came in. So I'm interested, the spring transfer portal doesn't open until April 16th. The spring game's on April 12th. So, if they had any visitors, which, last year, I think Dominic Williams entered in the spring, but Branson Hickman had been entered since, I think, the winter. So, I don't know. Maybe they bring in some guys that still haven't found homes for the spring game, but it is interesting that the spring game is before the spring portable window this year, because I know last year that was a big visit weekend for them.
You don't see it too often. I guess Jaden Rashad is kind of doing that, right? He's going to sit out the spring, but he's already entered the portal. It just doesn't happen a whole lot, but I guess it's certainly going to be interesting to see how all this kind of
last year
unfolds.
the window was bigger in the spring, I believe, for the portal, so maybe that was different then, but yeah.
Better enjoy it. Might be the last time that we go through a spring portal. You never know. All right, very good. That's going to do it. If you want to see the entire Sooner State rankings, you can go to Soonerscoop.com. You can join Soonerscoop.com for just $1 right now. One of the, or if not the largest community online for Oklahoma fans, as we, I guess, really try to, in a way, put a pin on the 2024 football season with the end of the Super Bowl and move on into the start of 2025 with spring ball coming up right around the corner for Oklahoma and everybody else across the country. That's going to do it for George, Josh. I'm Eddie. We'll see you right back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel.